Johnny, I'd like to know from you what you as a historian just saw in the war archive that we just walked through.
Well, to begin with, I'm still overwhelmed. I think somebody used the term existential vertigo. It was a bit like that, but for me, the most beautiful moment was when he said, when you open up the sediment like this, and I was like, that's exactly when you open up the file in a historical archive. It's amazing. But I've been teaching for a long time on Earth archives, so it was kind of interesting to have this kind of embodied experience there. But at the same time, it is very interesting to hear geoscientists, people working on deep core sediments, talk about history and use the same terms and to understand these are not exactly, we also call this history and Earth archive, but we come to it quite differently. I felt a certain sense of jealousy because I also study an archive.
Yes,
but they're not so cool, and they're not. I don't have a joystick in my archive.
Yeah.
But for me, the term that kept running through my head also. We think in terms of bioprospecting in the historical archive, but this is a kind of prospecting. We can't call it bioprospecting.
Yeah.
But what is the term? Because we are prospecting for knowledge.
Yes.
We are, as a historian, as an anthropologist, as conference visitors, they are. So I was thinking, what are we mudding through over here as we dig up the mud of the ocean? What are we actually mudding through? And I'm not sure I yet have an answer, but it's something that has made me think.
First question, what is the most exciting thing about the sea to you right now? 1 minute.
We had so many great discussions. We had the chance, every one of us, every participant, to present our research in a very tiny time frame of 5 minutes, which I found very interesting and very fascinating to get all these different perspectives on oceans and the seas.
I want you to sit kind of straightish, if you can, and pay attention to your breathing.
The relationship between the development of global capitalism and the materiality of the sea.
The ocean is a conceptual and physical space, and you can see example of this.
Toxicology laboratory to
again, what is made possible through the sea itself.
We start to question the quality of our knowledge. We start to question the quality of our models, the quality of our technologies, until the next tsunami came again.
So what is the lesson learned from here?
Rescue knot, and it's typically used in rescue operations, but I found that I couldn't really stretch the metaphor enough to encompass everything that is in this image, which is...
We take from the sea that we somehow commodify and then put in all the oil and gas, but also other stuff that we're creating there.
It's kind of like mucky, sluicy.
Somehow are working with us, as we've just seen. So whatever we put in there somehow gets into the ecosystem and it becomes a part of the ecosystem which we cannot separate anymore, because if we separate it again, it will die. So it's not a reversible thing.
Because the categories and the alliances that we take for given kind of get scrambled.
So we are here with the workshop Ocean World at the German Maritime Museum in Bremerhaven, at the moment in our collection, what you see behind. And for us it was really a good opportunity to do these workshops also in cooperation with the colleagues from the Bremen University, with the ARTEC and the Institute for Ethnology and Cultural Studies, and also to engage with all these interesting colleagues that came here for the workshop.
Get up and find a seat at one of the 4 different tables that we have put up for you. Station number 1 is the one over there. And everyone who's working on something like governance, legal regimes or infrastructures in relation to the ocean is very welcome to take a seat there. We have a second station which welcomes people working on labor or cargo. Station number 3 is interested in people who are working on modes of knowing the oceans. And then number 4, which is in the far corner over there, is a station for people who are working on more than human inhabitants of the ocean, blue foodways, temporalities, afterlives, ecologies, toxicities, or debris. So for now, as a sort of getting to know each other and getting to know each other's work, please join one of the 4 groups, and then we will see each other again in 30 minutes.
That's right. We should do quarter stickers.
Who's ready mapping? Like, wanna? Okay, I can.
Okay.
But sometimes you could think it's actually the reason why is Barbados was first hit by harmful.
So the seafloor against their livelihood removed.
Tropical identity system. Like, what is that?
Part of what I see then is that the nation state, as a form, it becomes a peculiar way in order to be able to make decisions about the planet, including about the ocean. And so I think really then the issue isn't that we should throw the baby out with the bathwater and assume then that the whole UN system is not working very well, and to instead recognize that the problem isn't necessarily the UN, but that the UN is a collection of member states that come to the table already overburdened with an asymmetrical relationship of power.
A techno fix is that we invent technologies or infrastructure basically to manage or govern environmental problems. So when we talk about algae, for example, one technological fix that's out there is barriers. So in the Caribbean, people are installing barriers to keep sargassum at bay. And these fixes, technological fixes, create new problems. We see that turtles get stuck there. If you don't clean the algae from behind the barriers, they die, and then they just kind of pollute the waters around the barrier. Fish can get stuck. So these technological fixes are not per se the solution that probably a lot of humans are hoping for. So what we can see in the Caribbean is that humans start working with other species to manage sargassum algae to a certain degree. So they are, for example, planting more seagrass beds now. And that really helps in addressing the algae problem. So technology or infrastructure is not always the answer to the problem that we're observing.
This professorship in maritime anthropology and cultures of water has really allowed me to think with and from the ocean. And thinking with and from the ocean automatically means thinking in planetary terms. And I think we've only begun to understand the relationship between the ocean and the planet as a system.
I mean, I don't want to talk all the time about ocean problems, but there are serious at the moment. And I think social science and the humanities has some good stakes also to do with other colleagues from the natural sciences and also engineering, to do something about it, because often when we are not in, it comes very oft to very much only problem-solving solutions, like we call that kind of technology fixes, and this I think is important also to have the social science perspective and also to have a global perspective, that not only we can run around the world and say, oh, there's this problem and we have that solution. Though we, as anthropologists, STS researchers, historians, we have to look at the local histories of these conflicts and environmental problems.
If we in Indonesia have tsunamis more often than the presidential election, then why does the science in Indonesia is not such as advanced in Japan or in the US, for example? Why do we need support for tsunami warning system from the German epistemic communities, for example? So that's quite an intriguing question for me, and so I start from there. Moreover, the way I see tsunami knowledge is developing, it actually requires tsunami itself. So there's actually this generative capabilities of tsunami that is very important in the advancement of knowledge, of science, of technologies, and that gives a very important message even to social science or to interdisciplinary research or even transdisciplinary research on how we work together and understand this Earth system, this Earth being, and live with it rather than trying to fight against it.
Most scholars look at from the vantage point of the relationship among states or the relationship between refugees and states, but have neglected very much from the vantage point of capital. Even though anything that needs to get from Suez to Gibraltar needs to pass perpendicular to the migrant corridor. So at a certain point, especially when the burden of rescue started to fall more on the merchant fleet, and there were these continuous collisions between the itineraries of illegalized passage, and the movement of cargo, I became interested in, well, what happens in those collisions? What is the relationship between these transits and the kind of merchant force field that surrounds the oil rigs, the fishing fleet, the merchant fleet, and obviously the ports and the workers that are propelling all of this circulation. For instance, one of the things that was very exciting to me was seeing the ways in which the political orders that get formed, even kind of provisionally or spontaneously at sea around the question of rescue or distress or salvage, in some ways kind of chafe against like our established certainties of what political alliances should be like. So, for instance, the ways in which the giant of global shipping, which is Maersk, might become the guarantor of the human rights of refugees when states are reneging on the promises of protection, or the ways in which sailors often kind of, lower in the ranks. So ABC men might disobey company orders in order to report to an activist collective that they saw a refugee boat in distress. And so these kinds of political moments or these political apertures that are created around the moment of maritime, specifically maritime peril, that might not happen in the same way on land. I think that, thinking with the ocean, for me, means thinking through those moments of political possibility.
Nature/culture. We're trying to establish that differentiation between nature and culture by utilizing technologies themselves as these monitoring systems that can somehow retain Darwinian biological evolutionary processes distinct from the technosphere and the anthropogenic world. What a weird, strange idea.
This kind of conference opens up the possibility to ask questions about what a starting point based at sea and not on land can teach us about our present moment, but also how we got here. And I think that's why some of the conversations that we've had about the rise of global capitalism, it's how it's intertwined with processes of colonization, with questions about race, gender, other kinds of discussions in order to be able to, in order to see more clearly that those kinds of identities help to inform the symbolic politics, the symbolic order that everyday people recognize as normal, but that it's our job as intellectuals, as artists, as academics to be able to push the discussion forward in order to think both land and sea for a just future in which all beings, both people, animals, plants, algae, all life forms are able to flourish.
If you could choose from heaven to sky, which sea creature would you like to be?
Just all that sea.
It's an open question. Any question you can ask